It was supposed to be a fun, laid-back backyard party with friends and family, a chance to kick back, relax, and enjoy a nice evening. But, as the night went on, things took an unexpected turn. Just when we thought everything was going smoothly, someone decided to call the cops. That someone. None other than our neighbor, Karen. Yep, you heard that right. She was so upset by the noise that she thought it was the best idea to involve the police. But here's where things get interesting and a little bit ironic. My wife, the one who's always calm and collected in situations like these, has a pretty incredible job. Turns out, she trains the entire local police department. You know, the officers who were about to show up at our party. So, imagine the scene. The cops arrive, ready to break up what they think is just another rowdy party. Little did they know, they were walking into a situation where their trainer was at the center of it all. Would this turn into an awkward confrontation, or would Karen's complaint backfire? Stay tuned to find out what happened next. As the party continued, I couldn't help but notice Karen peering out from behind her curtains, eyes locked on our backyard. We had barely started grilling when her lights flicked on, and that was the moment I realized she was about to cause trouble. This wasn't the first time Karen had been an issue, but it was definitely the most dramatic. For the last few months, she'd been complaining about every little thing. Too much noise, too many cars parked on the street, even our dog barking a little too loud during the day. But this time she went too far. My wife, Sarah, had warned me about Karen before. She always told me how hard it was to deal with neighbors like her, but she never really had to deal with it personally. Sarah's work involves a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, training officers on everything from crisis management to de-escalation techniques. It's a job that demands, and she's earned it. So when the officers arrived, I knew it wasn't going to be as simple as just turning down the music and apologizing. They weren't just showing up to tell us to keep it down. They were showing up to deal with a situation where they were about to find out just how well they knew my wife. The tension was building, and I had no idea what was going to happen next. Would they take Karen seriously? Or would Sarah's reputation give us the edge? As the flashing lights of the patrol car reflected off the walls of our house, I could feel my heart rate pick up. I had no idea what to expect. The officers stepped out, clearly unsure of how to approach the situation. Karen was already outside, standing at the edge of her driveway, ready to point the finger. She looked almost smug, convinced that she had us cornered. But what she didn't realize was that this wasn't just any party, and we weren't just any neighbors. Sarah stepped forward first, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with Karen's tense, expectant stance. She smiled politely at the officers, who immediately seemed to relax when they recognized her. A couple of them nodded, acknowledging her as their trainer. I could see Karen's face drop, a mix of confusion and disbelief crossing her features. It was like the wind had been knocked out of her, and she suddenly wasn't so sure of her position anymore. But Karen wasn't one to back down easily. She started talking faster, trying to make her case about the noise, the crowds, and the disturbance. The more she spoke, the more it felt like she was digging herself into a hole. The officers listened, but it was clear they were now more focused on Sarah than on Karen's complaints. Some of them exchanged glances, almost like they were waiting for something to happen. The whole situation felt like a standoff. Karen against us, the officers caught in the middle, unsure of how this was going to play out. But as Sarah remained composed, I could see the subtle shift in the officers' behavior. It was clear they respected her, and I couldn't help but wonder just how much her training had shaped their instincts. Would they side with us, or would the tension of the situation force them to take Karen's side? We were teetering on the edge of a decision, and neither Karen nor I knew what was coming next. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Karen was still ranting, her voice rising with every word. She pointed at the music, then at the people laughing and chatting in the backyard, as if we were all guilty of some massive crime. But it wasn't just the noise that seemed to bother her, it was everything. She was determined to paint us as the problem, as if we were somehow ruining the entire neighborhood. I could feel my anger building, but Sarah stayed eerily calm, even as Karen's accusations got more personal. I could tell she was trying not to let her emotions show, but her eyes betrayed a hint of frustration. The officers were looking between Sarah and Karen now, clearly caught in the middle. A few of them seemed almost uncomfortable, unsure of how to handle the situation, while others were just waiting for someone to make the next move. Karen wasn't giving up, though. She went as far as to suggest that we were breaking some sort of noise ordinance, that we were disrupting the peace of the neighborhood. And that's when the first real crack appeared in the officers' composure. One of them, Officer Matthews, stepped forward. He'd trained with Sarah for years, and he was one of the ones who looked to her for guidance. He cleared his throat, then glanced at Karen before turning to Sarah. "Is there something you'd like to explain, ma'am?" Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the officers. "Sure, Officer Matthews, but let's first make sure we're all clear on what's actually happening here." The way she spoke, so measured, so precise, seemed to shift the dynamic in an instant. It was as if the officers knew that this wasn't just a typical noise complaint, it was something deeper. Karen's face went pale as she realized she might have just bitten off more than she could chew. The eyes of the officers were now fully on Sarah, waiting for her next move. Karen, still reeling, tried to get one last word in, but it was clear she wasn't in control anymore. What would happen next? Would Sarah's calm confidence win over the officers, or was Karen about to turn the tables in a way none of us could have predicted? The night hung on the edge of a knife, and I had no idea which way it was going to fall. Just as it seemed like the tension was about to break, Karen made a move I hadn't expected. She whipped out her phone and in one swift motion dialed another number. I could hear her talking in low, urgent tones, but the words that followed sent a chill down my spine. "Yes, it's Karen. I need someone else out here. This situation is escalating. Get me the higher-ups. No." The officers glanced at each other, a slight flicker of confusion passing through their ranks. Matthews raised an eyebrow, but didn't speak, and I could feel the weight of what was happening. Karen wasn't just calling for a regular backup, she was calling in someone specific, someone with authority. I tried to keep my cool, but this sudden escalation felt like she had just upped the ante, and I wasn't sure how much further it could go. As Karen was still on the phone, Sarah shot me a quick glance, her face unreadable, but I could see a tiny muscle twitch in her jaw. This wasn't good. We both knew that in the small world of local politics and law enforcement, Karen had a reputation. She wasn't just a disgruntled neighbor. She had connections, serious ones. My gut twisted with the realization that Karen might have more influence in this situation than we thought. The officers knew it too, but they seemed unwilling to make the first move to call it all off, especially with someone else on the way. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any worse, another car pulled up, a black SUV, its windows tinted dark enough to make anyone wonder who was inside. The officers shifted uncomfortably as a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out of the vehicle. He wore a suit, but something about the way he carried himself made it clear he wasn't here for a casual visit. He moved with authority, his eyes scanning the scene, as if he was already aware of everything that had happened. Karen's face broke into a smug grin. "This is Chief Thompson," she announced, gesturing toward the man. "I think we're going to get this sorted out now." My stomach dropped. I had heard of Chief Thompson, but I never imagined he'd be called to something like this. If anyone had the power to change the course of things in the neighborhood, it was him. As he approached, his gaze met Sarah's, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of recognition between them. But that was all. What was going through Sarah's mind? Was she prepared for this? I could feel the walls closing in, and everything inside me screamed that this wasn't going to end quietly. The stakes were higher than ever, and what had started as a small backyard gathering was now a full-blown standoff between us and a system I wasn't sure we could beat. Chief Thompson approached slowly, his eyes locked on Sarah for a moment, before his gaze flicked to Karen. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Karen was practically glowing with satisfaction, sure that this was her moment. I could feel the tension creeping up my spine, wondering how Sarah was going to handle this. She had trained nearly every officer in the department, but this was a different beast altogether. Without saying a word, Sarah took a step forward and extended her hand toward the chief. There was no hesitation in her movements, just a calm confidence that seemed to settle the atmosphere around her. Thompson shook her hand firmly, his eyes softening for the briefest moment, and for the first time all night, it felt like the tables were shifting. "Sarah," he said quietly, almost as if he hadn't expected to find her here. "I didn't know it was you." "I wasn't trying to make a scene," she replied, her voice cool, but with a slight edge that made me realize she wasn't going to back down this time. "But you know how it is with Karen. We're just trying to enjoy a quiet evening." The chief looked over at Karen, then back at Sarah. He wasn't buying the drama. "You called me for this?" he asked Karen, his voice firm, yet not unkind. The shift in his tone was subtle but unmistakable. Karen's smug expression faltered just for a second. "I..." Karen stammered, clearly caught off guard. "This is a disturbance. They're breaking the rules." Thompson raised a hand to cut her off. "Karen, I've been called in for a lot of things, but this isn't one of them. I trust Sarah's judgment, and if she says it's fine, then it's fine." Karen's face turned crimson, her anger rising once again. But just as she opened her mouth to argue, a voice came from the back of the group. It was one of the younger officers, the one who had been trained by Sarah. "Actually, Chief, I've been monitoring the noise levels all evening. We had 0 complaints from other neighbors, and the decibel readings are within the legal limits." For a moment, Karen looked like she might explode, but instead she stood there frozen. Thompson shot her one final look, his expression cold. "I think it's time for you to go inside, Karen. This party is under control, and you're welcome to enjoy the rest of your evening elsewhere." Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the words never came. She just stood there, blinking in disbelief as the officers, who had once been on her side, now turned away from her completely. The power had shifted, and she was left standing on the edge of a broken argument. Just when it seemed like the dust was settling, Sarah leaned in close to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've got a feeling this isn't over." Before I could ask what she meant, I heard a soft click. Karen had taken out her phone again. But this time, she wasn't dialing 911. She was texting someone, and as the screen lit up in her hands, I caught a glimpse of the message. "This isn't over. I'll make sure of it." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The night wasn't over, not by a long shot.